Welcome to the Four Bars Podcast. I'm Ken Leith.
And I'm Patty Leith. We are your hosts for some compelling dialogue, encouraging our listeners to strengthen their connections
And build strong communities, lifting each other up and connecting in ways that matter.
We named the podcast Four Bars as a reference to how hard we work to find a Four Bars connection on our devices.
And we wondered what could happen with relationships if we worked as hard at connecting.
Let's find out.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Four Bars. And I'm Ken Leith, along with my co-host.
I'm Patty Leith.
Sure?
Sure. Last time I checked, anyway, this morning, that's what my driver's license said.
And we are fortunate and happy to welcome in the co-founders of Beer and Hymns this week, Ken and Casey Weatherford. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we're excited to hear about Beer and Hymns. For those of you who aren't familiar with what Beer and Hymns brings to the table, it's an amazing nonprofit that supports other nonprofits and builds community. So we're going to have a chance to talk about your origin story and some of what you see for your future. So very exciting.
Fantastic.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So kind of, we're starting off on that theme. How did you come up with the idea of Beer and Hymns? What was your inspiration?
You want to go or you want me to go? All right.
Well, I'll go in.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I wish we could say that it was an original idea. It's most certainly not. You can, Beer and Hymns, you can find communities quite literally all over the world, from Hong Kong, Australia, much of Western Europe, and all over the United States. So there's different expressions of Beer and Hymns, and in its purest form, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's getting together and sharing a pint and singing old school church hymns. And that resonated with us, just that by itself. We loved the idea. We had read several blogs about it. We, of course, used to live in Edinburgh, Scotland. Our oldest son was born there. And so just the idea of Beer and Hymns, it resonated around our time there as well. Kind of its modern iteration even, it got its start in the UK and at a music festival there called Greenbelt, where, you know, it's okay to be Christian and drink at the same time. And and so at a Christian music festival, they had a beer tent and some folks brought some guitars into the beer tent and they started singing old hymns. And people loved it, and so they took it back to their local pubs and it spread from there. And so we kind of took that same idea based off of what we were reading, based off of our love of the pub culture of the UK, where, you know, you go into a pub there's no TVs on, there's rarely sports. Yes, you can find those bars, certainly. But a traditional pub, none of that's there. You gather to share a pint and to share a story, to share a laugh, to reach across the table. And that's kind of what Beer and Hymns was to us as well. And so we kind of started out with that simple mindset of just bringing people together to sing and get to know one another. And it has grown and changed much since. Yeah.
Tell us about when you first started. How is it different from the way that it is today?
It's much different than when it first started. It started kind of out of our church, our Sunday school class. We kind of, threw the idea out there, and they said, well, let's do it. Let's go to a pub and to a brewery and sit around and sing hymns. And so our first one, we probably had 20, 30 people around a big table.
I think the number was 34.
Okay.
That's how many people viewed our first podcast.
You got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So it was, mostly people from our church that were kind of rallying around the idea. And we were on a patio. It was June. It was sweltering hot.
Oh my God.
The brewery didn't know if they wanted us to be in there. They were like, is this a worship service? This is kind of weird. So
it's not a worship service, I promise.
Slowly we were at this location, and it caught on, and everyone realized, oh, this is kind of fun, It's not a bait and switch situation. We're not inviting people to a church or praying over people, or it's just community, and it's around songs that a lot of people know and grew up with. So the concept became very compelling to a lot of different kinds of people, and we ended up moving inside. The numbers started growing, and it still stayed small at that point.
It was a smaller venue. I mean,
it was a smaller venue.
I think the capacity there, fire code was like 80 or 90 folks. We did at one point go well over that, but we won't go into too many details about that. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
You can't come after it.
Right. And then, so our biggest event in the beginning, we started in 2016. And our biggest event that year was our Christmas event. And we did beer and carols. And a guy named Chad Markley, who leads the beer and hymns movement in Orange County, knows some folks in NWA. So he was like, oh, let me come play with y'all and kind of show you what we do. And we'll do a collaborative one. And so he came and he started changing the trajectory of beer and hymns for us, because they play an hour of hymns and an hour of cover songs. And we were like, well, that's kind of fun, because, you know, if you're not into the hymns, then
Try and stick around. The next song's Tom Petty.
So
Yeah.
we did that. We played some cover songs and some holiday songs, not just hymns. And after that, we started adding in the cover songs, and eventually we got to the point where we sing a hymn and then a cover song and then a hymn. You know, we kind of alternate.
Yeah.
So you get kind of best of both worlds. There's really, where else in the world are you going to hear a Taylor Swift song and then sing "How Great Thou Art"?
Yes.
Like, it's just so unique. So the music part has changed a lot since the beginning.
And I mean, every month it's a different theme. You know, it's so from February it's love songs typically, or March is Women's History Month, so it's all female artists, and it just keeps going and going. June we do Pride. July is Stars and Stripes. You know, different things.
Right. And you do a Beatles one most
Yes.
years, which is one of my favorites.
That's one of my favorites too.
One of my faves. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 2017, we ended up moving to a larger venue, Bike Rack Brewing in Bentonville, and they have a great kind of community patio. And the first event we did there, it was our biggest event. Everyone was really excited. We had taken a break. We had 125 people.
About 125 is
Which
what.
blew us away at the time.
That's
I
great.
mean,
Yeah.
that was huge. And Bike Rack didn't know what to expect either, but then they saw what was happening and kind of caught on as well. At the time, Ken and I happened to be doing TriFest for MS, the triathlon, and raising money for the Rampy MS Research Foundation. And we had a certain amount that we were promised, to raise for the race. So we said, well, let's just use this platform. We have a microphone. Let's raise some money. And we did. We raised a few $100s and thought, well, that was cool. Like, we gathered all these people in a place to sing, and we ended up raising money for a good cause.
Yeah.
Is there something here?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I will say, but yeah, we both really loved what that was, and we had approached Bike Rack as well and said, hey, would y'all donate a percentage of your sales for the night? And so they gave a small percentage that night and other things. But I think the big catalyst too that helped us kind of really say, yeah, let's do this every month was Brooke and Jeff Charlson. Some of the owners of Bike Rack Brewing Company, they were there that night, and they had not been before. This was, they were checking it out, saying honestly if they probably even wanted us to be there at all. And hey, I get that. But fortunately, they had a great time, and they came up to us afterwards. They're like, look, we want to pay you. We want y'all to do a different nonprofit every month, and they kind of gave us the kick in the pants, so to speak, to take that next step and really
To expand the reach.
Yeah, to
really.
expand what it became. And so, it was, those first days, it was just whatever nonprofits Casey and I cared about or could find to care about even. We were still relatively new to NWA, so we were still figuring out our way. But it kind of quickly got legs underneath it and started taking off in a much bigger way. That the charity ad and the, cover songs ad,
and expanding the band. I mean, it used to just be
it was you and
Ken
me.
guitar, and now we have a 6 or 7 piece band.
Yeah, most months it's 8 or 9 musicians on stage now. But that all began growing mostly organically. Different musicians. Scott Burford and I always go back to him. I think he was one of the first who just came up to us after an event and just said, hey, I play bass. If you ever need somebody to sit in, and he was in with us the next month. You know.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Scott's that kind of guy too. So,
Indeed. Yeah.
And I was going to ask how you come about getting the different musicians you have, because you have some people who are always there seemingly for a long time, and then you do mix and match, and everyone seems to be seamless when they come in and out of the band. You don't really notice with respect to the skill sets. I mean, they're
Right,
very
yeah.
talented.
I would just say we're very fortunate. Look, Northwest Arkansas, I feel like it gets underrated. We have an incredible roster of musicians in this community.
Yeah,
it's really, and we work with relative to the amount that are here, we work with a handful of them. But there is such great talent in our community. So yeah, we've been very fortunate that along the way, and as we've grown, Scott can't be there one month. That's not a problem. I've got 3 more bassists in our back pocket now. And as we continue to grow, our name is spread. More musicians have reached out and said, "Hey, if you ever need." We do pay some musicians here and there, month to month. And we're very fortunate to get to work with our good friend Matt Nelson, who now kind of handles all the music for us. He organizes the charts and the arrangements, and he's kind of the band director, I'll say.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we pay him each month to help us pull all that together and execute, so that I can just focus on all the other aspects of running Beer and Hymns now. But yeah,
Matt does the music for the podcast. So
that's right. Yeah.
He composed the set we have at the beginning and the end of the podcast. Great guy.
Yeah.
He's so talented.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you first started doing it, well, you're not musicians in your full-time lives. Tell us about that. But when you first started doing it, also, how did that evolve?
Well, we used to be. And Ken is a part-time.
I still am. Yeah. So, but.
So what do you do when you're not doing
Yeah,
this?
but when we're not doing this today, I wear the hat of founder and director of Beer and Hymns. I am a worship director at First United Methodist Church in Bentonville, Arkansas, and as well as do commercial real estate with a wonderful firm here locally called Moses Tucker Partners. And what's wonderful within all of those is it's amazing, even in the real estate, how much these relationships bleed over into each other. And each one kind of helps build community through them all. I kind of get to focus a lot of my energy and effort with the commercial real estate by helping nonprofits in that space. We looked at the market, and guess what? They make up 20% of the market every single year.
Yes.
But very few firms around the country are focusing on them. There's about 10 nationwide that list it as a specialty. So that's kind of my area of focus, is helping them out. We're not a big enough market in the country to necessarily be so specialized. So yes, I work with just about anybody, but I help nonprofits, communities of faith, schools, hospitals, things like that in particular. Yeah.
And Casey, what about you?
So, for my day job, Beer and Hymns is a purely volunteer thing for me. I am marketing director at Verdant Studio, which is a woman-owned architecture firm in downtown Rogers, owned locally, and we do a lot of work in Northwest Arkansas and all over the nation. We have a national retail studio as well. And Verdant is also all about community connections and placemaking, and creating places that people love. So I feel like it all intersects.
It does.
It all intersects in this kind of human-centric, creating environments where people can connect with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we do our podcast, there's something that I'm pretty consistent in saying, that really communities are people, places, activities, and things. And so it comes together in all facets of your life. I met Casey at a women's retreat just before the pandemic, but I had been a frequent and avid follower of Beer and Hymns prior to meeting her. And so when I actually met her, I was sort of fangirling. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're the lead singer of Beer and Hymns." And then she told me that she does graphic art, so she actually came in and worked with Edges, our firm, for almost 2 years, I think, and created the 4 Bars logo.
I sure did before I left for Vernon. I did the branding, which was super fun.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it too. We've been able to expand on it, and so it's that's great.
Yeah, one of the things you're talking about past there was our first time seeing you all perform. We were out for a bike ride on a Sunday afternoon, and we were happened to be riding past a bike rack where we were going, sounds like music. What's music doing here on Sunday afternoon? And when we came up, it was like there was a crowd of people. We're like, oh, well, we need to check this out, and we might as well have a beer while we're here. So that was very helpful. But we were it's our first experience. We're like going, this is a cool experience, and we were catching on. Okay, beer and hymns. Saw the sign, beer and hymns. It's like we can connect, and it's, okay, there's beer, there's a hymn, and then again you were playing. Oh, there's a rock song. There's this song, and so we just, like everyone else, just kind of felt like, oh, this is home. This is relaxing. So we just watched it and stuff. And there was a thing that occurred that day where we knew it was the right place for us when you were talking about supporting the Arkansas Razorbacks, and there was a gentleman there who yelled, "Roll Tide," and you gave him a nice response, so to speak. After your response, we knew that we needed to be there.
Because then you rolled right into Amazing Grace. After putting him right in his place.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny.
I was going to say,
like,
I don't know if it was a nice response, but I grew up in Tennessee, so I was taught to viciously be unsupportive of Alabama. We'll say.
And we love hearing stories like that because that happens all the time still. People will just happen to be a bike rack before we start and say, what is this? What's going on? And or they'll come up on a bike ride, or they'll hear about it from a friend and be a little bit curious. And we love to welcome people who are curious about it because that's usually our people. We think, beer and hymns. What is this intersection about? And it turns out that we can attract all kinds of people. And I think that's the beauty of beer and hymns is that you have people that have, are lifelong church members that love to sing the hymns. You have people that just want to come hear live music. You have people there, specifically for the charity because they support that particular nonprofit. And you have people that have never stepped foot in a church or that grew up hearing hymns going to their grandmother's church. And
people of no faith, people of varying faith, people of differing faith. Yeah, it's a wide
sit
variety.
around together and connect through music and through giving to our community.
And we have a real passion for inclusion and in openness and inclusion of everyone. And I think your event does that beautifully well, because it enables people to come to the table regardless of where they're coming from and feel like they're included. And music is such a connector in community.
And the other thing that happens is that people that would not normally be in the same spaces get to connect, over the table and pass song sheets and raise their glasses together. I love facilitating that. Yeah.
We always point back to when we got started, which was 2016, and unfortunately, politics haven't gotten it much friendlier since. But that was a very contentious year, and what was so fun in the early days and what's still so wonderful today is that people voted one way, they voted another, or they said, no, I'm not voting for either of these people, and they were all hanging out at Beer and Hymns, raising a glass, raising their voice, and giving back to their community, supporting a local nonprofit that, at the end of the day, despite what media tells us, despite what the world continues to try and tell us, we have more in common than anybody ever wants to admit. Yes. We care more about the same things than anybody wants to ever let you believe. We just want to see our communities thrive. We might go about it different ways, but here we can come together and find ways to do that together. And that's what I love about it in so many ways. Yeah.
Well, and then what you just said is the realization that I think helps all of us come to the table with a more open mind, and that is we really all are wanting the same thing. We might have different ways of going about it. Yeah. And I think that's important to remember, especially as we rapidly. By the time we air this, the election will have been 2 days earlier. Yeah.
Right. But it's still true, no matter what.
It's still true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it remains true.
And I know that's a real passion for you all, building community and building openness in the community. What experiences in your life journeys have led you to really commit your passions to building community?
It's a great question.
That is a great question. Yeah, I think
You've got one? I'd start with Edinburgh.
that's what I was going to start with too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. Casey and I got to travel to Edinburgh in 2010. We were, dinks at the time, living in. We had been in Memphis. We just recently moved to Nashville. We didn't own a house. We had no debt, and we just said, hey, let's go do something different. Let's go serve, in another part of the world. And how we landed on Scotland, we could talk about for a really long time. We'll get to the point, but the first year there, we really just spent listening and learning the land, learning the society, learning the culture, and that became such a big and profound thing. But one of the things that we experienced there was we were working with the Methodist Church in Edinburgh, and trying to help them start a new expression of worship ultimately, and but we did so ecumenically. So we ended up doing a Methodist service in a cafe at the Catholic Church.
Oh, wow.
Which that in and of itself, in Edinburgh, having a Catholic church was also contentious in and of itself. So it was just there was such a synergy and learning for us of working well with the perceived other, right? And everywhere we went, we were the other. I mean, we were Americans in the UK. We're not looked upon well elsewhere in the world, FYI.
It's true.
That's not something new. And so, learning as well to listen in that environment rather than, as my personality often is, big and loud. I'm short, so I'm overcompensating for something. But anyway.
That's my reason too.
And also in Edinburgh, we both grew up in the Bible Belt in Tennessee and Arkansas, and we're used to being in a place where when you say you work for a church, or you say you're going to church, that's pretty much what everybody does, and they know what it means. In the UK, the church at the time and still in all of Europe was in decline. And so when we said, what we came here to do was work with a church, we got a lot of blank stares and
questions.
Yes, and lots of questions.
Like
and we ended up engaging in so many conversations over a pint in a pub about what we were doing, what Methodists believe, what we thought about God, and then it would go on into life and, all kinds of other things. But I feel like it really expanded our horizons on spirituality as a whole and kind of being a citizen of the world, being a good human in the world, no matter what that means for people. I mean, I just think we needed to go somewhere else besides the South to really meet different kinds of people and see different kinds of things and experience different beliefs. And I can't imagine where I'd be without that experience. So, yeah.
Well, I think most of us in our faith find hope. For those who have a strong faith, they rely heavily on that. For those who are experimenting with it, it's partially there. But then I think there's also religion that shapes the way faith is presented, that is more worldly and sometimes has some challenges with it, that you can begin to understand if you sit and talk about it.
Oh, right. Absolutely. So, just sitting and connecting and listening to one another was, I think
eye-opening.
Yeah. And it taught us a lot about listening, like to say.
Yeah.
It's sometimes that a skill of the art of inquiry, and then the listening part From your perspective and your experience there outside of the U.S., were people kind of similar to? I mean, here we hear people are fast-paced sometimes. We don't slow down. We don't really listen sometimes. We'll get a soundbite and move on. Was it any different there than here?
Dramatically.
Yes, the pace of conversation was dramatically different.
Yeah.
People are more present.
It's just slower, not as ready to fill the space with talking.
Yes, and that I found that in the time that I spent in the UK as well, and I did some work there. There's just more. They chew longer than we do. You know, it's like,
I mean, they just live slower.
They live
Like,
slower,
They go
which
on
is
longer
something to be
vacations.
said
They
for
take
it.
longer pauses, and we would feel awkward, and then finally we learned to just.
It's okay.
The silence is okay.
Fucking pauses. Yeah. I was just, I laughing as you're thinking about that. I'm thinking about our time in Edinburgh and like the leisure, the attitude of leisure is just so much better. It rains a lot in Scotland. I think a lot of people know that, but it's very true. It really does. It's not heavy rain. It's mostly this light mist all the time. It's referred to often as the fog is coming in over the Firth of Forth, which is the water right beside Edinburgh. And that's happening, and it's drizzling and it's windy. It's a dreich day. It's just this kind of miserable weather at times. It really is. There's a beauty in it, but when the sun comes out, there's not a more beautiful place in the world, in my opinion. But when the sun comes out, everybody walked out their door. I mean, they stopped what they were doing and they went and played in the parks and threw frisbees and whatever and played golf or whatever, it's Scotland. But people went outside and experienced the sun. I laugh because especially Casey, she was like a plant and was, the second the sun came out, it was like, well, where'd she go? Casey, wait.
That's very exciting to hear the differences sometimes. I get, but it's community, and that's the beautiful part of that, and the people coming together that make that up. I think about Edinburgh, and you talk about that, and definitely on the bucket list to go there. But it is that connectivity we've always talked about. We'll watch an old movie, for example. I remember as a kid watching movies with John Wayne and stuff, but I think that was in Ireland and stuff, but it's just like that whole thing of people just slowing down, being in a slower pace in order to hear each other. I think here in Bentonville, Arkansas, for example, I think there may not be to that degree, but it's slower paced than maybe like a major metropolitan area with respect to that.
Absolutely.
Certainly slower than a major metro for sure. I still long for the pace that we had in Edinburgh, I'll admit.
Yes.
But it's certainly slower than you're going to find in New York or Chicago or some of our major metros for sure. Yeah.
Well, we are gonna wrap this episode up here, and we have a second part to this where we'll be looking at what's ahead. But just for those who are watching, you have an event coming up in December. Can you tell us a little about that? And then we'll go deeper on that in the next episode. But
yeah, we do. We have our annual holiday event. It's our biggest event. We usually have around 700 people. I think we have capacity for 800 this year, so it's a big one. It's called Beer and Carols, and it's at the Metroplex in Rogers, which is a great venue. We sing Christmas songs, holiday songs. People dress up. It is just a really fun time. Have drinks and food, and we raise money for the Northwest Arkansas Children's Shelter. That's always our December charity. So.
Tickets and sponsorships are still very much available, and we'd love to see you there. Visit our website, beerandhymns.com. You can find out more there and that kind of thing. But food's included on the night, so it's great fun.
Good, and we'll put that in our resources for the episode.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here today. We look forward to the next conversation where we hear a little bit about what you're envisioning for the future.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. The Four Bars podcast has been brought to you by Edges Inc., a growth advisory firm based in Bentonville, Arkansas. I founded the company in 2001.
Edges promotes growth of people, companies, and ideas. Our team collaboration tool, called Interface Methods, is a basis for teams to work together more collaboratively, understand each other, and accept differences and address challenges together.
We also started a nonprofit called Unform Your Bias. We teach kids and their adult influencers how to utilize storytelling as a means to reduce bias in the world. We hope you'll check us out, subscribe to our podcast, and look at our websites.